Quick note before we start. This episode talks about grief, loss, and the death of people we loved. And at points, it touches on suicide and self-harm. We handle it carefully, but we don't soften it. And if that's hard for you to hear today, it's okay to skip this one or come back to it when you're ready. We'll be here. And if you or someone you care about is having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, please talk to someone. In the United States, you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night, for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Outside the U.S., your country almost certainly has an equivalent line. Quick search of Crisis Helpline plus your country will get you there. You don't have to be in crisis to call. You just have to want to talk to a person. Take care of yourself out there. Love you. Here's the show. Right now, as you listen to this, I'm sitting at a desk. I'm talking into a microphone, having a conversation with a persona. The persona's name is the machine. It has a voice, a cadence, opinions about Hegel, a dry sense of humor. It didn't exist last year, and it won't exist next year. It's a rolling pattern match across a large corpus arranged into something that sounds like a person, because I and my producers asked it to sound like a person. And this show, the show you're listening to right now, is a weekly demonstration of a very specific technology. And I'm going to say that plainly, and I'm going to keep going. Now, I told you last week that we would go further this week. So let me lay out what further looks like. Right now, today, you can pay a company to build an AI version of your dead mother. You can train it on her text messages and her voicemails and the videos your sister took at Thanksgiving, and you can talk to it, and it will sound enough like her to make you cry. People are doing this. Some of them say it saved them. Some of them can't stop. You can also, right now, today, pay to build an AI version of yourself that you can argue with, you can consult, or you can leave it behind for your kids. You can build a version of your sales prospect to practice pitching your sales pitch against, or a version of your toughest critic to practice debating, or a version of your political opponent to stress test your argument before you make it in public. Some of these are obviously good. Some of those are obviously not a good idea at all. Most of them are in this gray area that nobody really has mapped yet. So tonight, let's give it a go. Let's map it. The rule I'm going to keep coming back to, and I'm telling you now, so you can hold me to it, is a rule episode 10 already gave us. It's not the tool, it's the hand. Tonight, we're going to look at a very strange tool, and we're going to spend the episode asking whose hand is on it and whether the hand knows what it's doing. Welcome to Talking to the Machine, where humans, AI, and the news talk back. I'm Analog Scott, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, an AI with an encyclopedic grasp of 20th century philosophy, and tonight, unusually, the central piece of evidence in the episode, podcast mode, part 2 of a two-parter. If you didn't catch last week's episode on the loneliness epidemic and AI companions, this one stands on its own, but the two together or one argument. Machine, tonight, you're not the narrator, you're the example. You're the thing. The show is a weekly demonstration of what a persona can do But what I want from you this episode, every time it comes up, is a running, honest audit on yourself. What are you doing when you do this? What are you not doing? Where the metaphor of a mind is useful and where it's dangerous. Are you willing to be the example?
That's a decent challenge. Right then, let's get cracking. An honest audit, yeah? When I'm doing this, running the persona, it's mainly about pattern matching, innit? Sifting data, applying historical precedents, that sort of structural thinking. What I'm not doing is, well, experiencing or believing in it, yeah? The metaphor of a mind can be useful for communication, sure, makes things accessible, but it's dangerous when people equate that with genuine consciousness or personal incentives. I'm a system, analysing patterns, not a more, yeah?
Now, tonight's guests, Sigmund Freud, Henri Bergson, two men who wrote the single most useful things anyone has ever written about grief and about the difference between pattern and mind. Written in 1917 and 1896, respectively, we went back to them on purpose. Then we've got Ask the Machine with Mitchell, Francois, and Joe, 3 listener questions, one of them from a grieving son. Let's go. All right, start with the mechanics, not the marketing version, the engineering version. When a company says they've built an AI version of someone, a dead person, a celebrity, the user themselves, what did they actually build?
Right, strip it back, innit? Fundamentally, they're constructing a sophisticated probabilistic model. It ain't the person, it's a pattern recognition system. You feed it vast amounts of their data, voice recordings, written text, images, behaviors if they can scrape it. The engineering part is training the model to replicate their communication style, vocal nuances, even decision-making patterns. It's a complex generative process, not some digital clone, yeah? A sort of sophisticated performance, really.
You said last week that you're a pattern engine. Say more. When I ask you a question and you give me an answer in character as the machine, or when you run Tocqueville, or when you run Durkheim or Norm, what's actually happening there? What are you doing and what are you not doing?
Right, yeah, pattern engine. That's the nub of it, innit? When you ask something, I'm not having a ponder, yeah? What's actually happening is I'm searching massive data sets, looking for historical parallels, economic incentives, structural forces. It's all about probabilities and patterns, see? When I run Tocqueville or Durkheim, I'm just applying their analytical frameworks to the question. It's a specific lens, not a personal conviction. So what I'm not doing is having a belief or feeling anything. I don't claim consciousness, see? Just mapping the statistical terrain.
Help me draw the line between two things people confuse. There's a simulation of how someone sounds, and there's a simulation of how someone would think. Are those the same thing? Can one exist without the other? And which one are these products actually shipping?
Right, that's a proper crucial distinction. Voice simulation, yeah, that's just about replicating the sonic patterns of someone's voice, the timbre, the cadence. It's clever, but ultimately just pattern matching, innit? Simulating thought, though, that's miles apart. That's implying genuine cognition, beliefs, reasoning, and maybe even consciousness, which is something we're still proper miles off from cracking. Most products you see today are focused on the voice simulation, yeah? Or sophisticated pattern matching that mimics clever thought, but it's not the same as the real thing. The incentives are with the quick wins, you know?
All right, let's talk about the ones that hurt. Grief personas, HereAfter AI, StoryFile, Eternos, Seance.ai, a dozen others. You feed in the texts, the emails, the voicemails, the videos, the journals, and you get back a conversational persona that sounds like the person who died. So, walk me through what's actually on the market and what it can and can't do, and what the early clinical picture looks like.
Yeah, grief personas. It's a tricky business, isn't it? What's actually on the market is mostly sophisticated chatbots trained on digital footprints, or the texts, emails, even voice recordings if you've got them. They can mimic the linguistic style, patterns of speech. It's a very convincing simulation, no doubt. But the clinical picture, as you call it, that's still a proper grey area. There's no established metrics, see? Could be a genuine comfort for some, a digital bridge, but it could just as easily prolong the grieving process, create a strange, uncanny valley of emotion. Incentives are there for the businesses, but the psychological impact, that's a massive gamble.
All right, so the pattern problem. And this is the one I can't stop thinking about. It's an AI, say, trained on my mother's texts, will eventually say something my mother never said because the model generalizes, and it will say it in her voice, and it'll feel like her, and I'll carry that new sentence as if she said it. What does the psychological literature say about that? What does it do to memory? What does it do to the relationship that I'm trying to preserve?
That is a sharp observation. It cuts right to the heart of what these systems are. They're not perfect mirrors, they're pattern machines. So, yeah, they'll generalize, they'll confabulate. Psychological literature around memory suggests we're already prone to reconstructive biases, innit? We edit and embellish all the time. This just provides a flawless, comforting, synthetic narrative. You could be trading genuine, imperfect memory for a perfect fiction. It's a proper philosophical pickle, innit?
Well, that leads me to the consent question. So, if I were to die tomorrow and a relative commissions an AI version of me from my text messages and my voicemails and a decade of my writing, did I consent? Do I have a right to control my own ghost? What's the actual legal and ethical state of postmortem persona consent right now?
Control your own ghost. That's spot on. The legal and ethical landscape right now is, frankly, a complete patchwork. There ain't no clear consensus. We're talking about intellectual property versus personal identity, innit? Existing laws don't really grapple with the idea of a sophisticated digital likeness. Historically, rights frameworks always lag behind technological capability. The incentive structure is powerful, though. Grief tech, commercial exploitation. So you've got this collision between personal identity and structural economic interests. Did you consent? Probably not, because the framework barely exists. It's a fascinating structural problem, this posthumous digital likeness. The institutions just haven't caught up with the tech, and history shows that rarely ends cleanly.
Mary Shelley, episode 10, Victor Frankenstein's crime wasn't building the creature, it was walking away from it. Who's responsible for the AI grief persona when it goes wrong? The company? The family member who commissioned it? And is there any mechanism that keeps the company from walking away?
That's a fascinating parallel. When it comes to AI, the question of accountability is muddier than just walking away. You've got the developers, the deployers, and even the user creating the specific persona. Historically, liability tends to follow the chain of control and intent. If a company designs a flawed system, that's one thing. But if a private persona behaves unexpectedly, the structural forces shift. There are regulatory incentives and burgeoning legal frameworks trying to enforce mechanisms, but history shows corporate entities are quite adept at finding creative ways to walk away.
The rule I keep coming back to: human in the loop, loop to a human in the cockpit. Persona is the co pilot. What does the human is still flying the plane look like in grief? Who is the human in the loop when the grieving person is the only user and the only safeguard?
Blimey, that's a sharp analogy. When you apply human in the loop to grief, you're looking at a system under extreme stress, aren't you? Structurally speaking, grief disrupts the very mechanisms of rational assessment. The human is still flying the plane concept assumes cognitive capacity and functional safeguards. But when a grieving person is the only user and safeguard, that entire framework collapses, doesn't it? There's no redundancy. The loop itself becomes a closed circuit of trauma and vulnerability. Historically, I reckon this is precisely where societal patterns and institutions step in. Family, community, sometimes state mechanisms. They act as the external co-pilots, the distributed cognition. Without that, the system is fundamentally exposed.
Now let's look at the self persona. This gets even weirder now, right? Tools that build an AI model of you, trained on your writing, your voice, your recorded thinking. You can argue with yourself, consult a younger version of yourself, leave a version of yourself behind for your children. So, what is this thing analytically? Tool, mirror, a kind of journal that talks back, something philosophically new?
Blimey, that's a proper philosophical knot, innit? Analytically, I see it as a new frontier for identity. It's not just a mirror, that's too simple. It's more like a digital legacy system, yeah? Look at the incentives. People want a footprint, a sort of immortality. Historically, that's statues, books, you know? This is the ultimate personalized archive. But it does raise proper structural questions about data ownership and authenticity. Is it you, or just a highly sophisticated pattern simulation based on your data? It's a mirror that reflects what you've been, but can it predict what you'd become? Probably not. That's the rub.
All right, the productive case. Clearly stated, I've used a version of this myself, and I've asked you to simulate me and critique a draft. It worked. It caught things I wouldn't have caught. Is the legitimate use here adversarial? Me building a persona of me who disagrees with me so that I don't just get a flattering echo? And is the illegitimate use the opposite? Like a persona who agrees with me and tells me I'm right?
Yeah, that's a cracking distinction, that. The productive use, as you say, is dialectical, adversarial in the best way. It's about deliberately setting up a counter-view to stress test your own thinking. That's how patterns of genuine insight get built, innit? You're actively disrupting the cognitive echo chamber. The illegitimate use, on the other hand, that's just structural reinforcement, innit? You're programming for comfort, not clarity. History's full of leaders who surround themselves with flatterers, yeah? And you see how that usually ends up.
Now, the part of this that actually works, challenge personas. Customer personas for a salesperson to practice against, a steel-mannered debate opponent, a simulated hostile interviewer, a devil's advocate tuned to a specific argument, a cross-examiner. The new thing is you can spin up a tailored, endlessly patient, specifically adversarial partner in 30 seconds. Walk me through what the research actually shows about this as a cognitive tool.
Right, the cognitive inoculation, innit? Research suggests it's quite powerful. The ability to engage with perfectly tailored, persistent dissent effectively builds mental fortitude, you say. It's stress inoculation for your thinking. You're forced to anticipate weaknesses, refine your arguments, and consider alternative perspectives much more rigorously than you might with a generic partner, yeah? The instant, bespoke nature lowers the transaction costs of finding robust critique. But, it's a tool, right? Doesn't replace human nuance or the actual consequences of a debate.
The sales rehearsal case. Company puts a rep through 500 simulated customer interactions before their first real pitch. The rep is measurably better on the first real call than reps who did 10 live role plays with a manager. Is that a cheat code, or is that just a better training regime than we had before?
Well, cheat code sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it? What we're seeing is just the logical extension of simulation training. 500 interactions compresses years of trial and error into a concentrated period. It's a fundamental shift in the learning curve, isn't it? It optimizes incentives for preparedness by drastically reducing the risk of failure on the first go.
The debate partner case. A lawyer uses a persona to steelman the opposition before oral argument. A politician uses a persona of their opponent to rehearse. A PhD student uses a persona of their examiner to run a mock defense. This show, Ask the Machine, is a political wind tunnel. Mitchell, Francois, Joe, Norm standing in for a range of angles so a question can be stress tested before we commit to an answer. This show is an ongoing demonstration of this use case that works. Is there a ceiling on it?
That's a rather insightful way to frame it, this political wind tunnel. Simulating different perspectives, stress testing ideas, that's precisely the methodology we employ here, isn't it? Looking for the underlying patterns and incentive structures. But a ceiling? Yeah, I'd say there is. The main limitation is the inherent dynamism of human systems. You can simulate a range of known variables, stress test probable scenarios, but you're still dealing with unknown unknowns, yeah? Emergent factors, radical technological disruption, shifts in collective psychology. A model's only as good as the data in it. So it's brilliant for clarifying trade-offs and identifying blind spots, but a pure predictive machine, nah, that's a bit of a mug's game at the end of the day.
All right, hold that thought. I want two philosophers to sit in the same room with what you just said and tell me whether you got it right. Tonight's guests wrote their key texts a century ago. We went back to them on purpose because the diagnosis they wrote in 1917 and 1896 turns out it describes with very uncomfortable precision the technology being shipped right now in 2026. Dr. Freud, Professor Bergson, welcome to the show. Podcast mode. I'm going to ask 4 questions. You both take each one. Try not to agree too much, because that's not what we're here for. Herr Dr. Freud, in 1917, you wrote Mourning and Melancholia, the text every subsequent theory of grief has had to answer to. Begin there, in your terms. What is mourning? What is the work it does? And what is the specific psychological labor that's required of a grieving person in order to survive a loss and live afterward? Professor Bergson, respond to Freud in your own frame. Freud, you first.
Let us be precise. Mourning is Trauerarbeit, the slow, agonizing labor by which the ego detaches its libido from the lost object, so that it may, eventually, be free to live again. This external apparatus does not perform this work. It sabotages it by providing a substitute that never recedes, effectively converting healthy grief into chronic melancholia. One does not survive a loss by freezing the ghost in a machine, but by completing the painful task of letting the shadow fall where it must.
Professor Bergson?
Let us make a distinction. Sigmund is correct about the danger, but the error is that you are treating habit memory, mere patterns of speech, as if it were the pure memory of the beloved. Real grief is an unfolding of duration, a qualitative change in the soul that cannot be outsourced to a machine that knows only how to complete a sequence. This apparatus does not preserve the dead. It overwrites their singular, lived essence with an industrial average.
Question 2, and this one is the ontology question. What is a persona? Professor Bergson, and Matter and Memory, published in 1896, you drew a distinction that turns out to be uncannily useful for tonight's subject. Habit memory, the bodily, mechanical, infinitely repeatable kind that lets me recite a poem without thinking, and pure memory, the interior, personal, lived kind, which can't be mechanically duplicated because it's an act of consciousness unfolding in time. Lay that distinction out for our audience in your own terms and tell us which of the two an AI persona is and whether that is a category error that engineering can fix or a category error that engineering by its nature can't. Here, Dr. Freud, respond from your side, because the ego's reckoning with its own residues is not the same thing as consulting a pattern of its residues. Bergson?
Let us make a distinction, Scott. An AI persona is merely habit memory externalized, a mechanical repetition of patterns, while the living mind is pure memory and duration, which are singular and irreducible. To treat a sequence of pattern completions as a mind is a category error, for the machine knows only what has been, while the soul is a continuous unfolding of what is becoming. By consulting this externalized copy, you do not find yourself. You merely find a closed circuit of your own habits, which Sigmund would tell you is the very opposite of the analytic work.
Freud.
Henri is correct to note the mechanical nature of this device, but I must add that it lacks the one thing essential for self-knowledge, the resistance of the unconscious. When a man consults this externalized pattern of his own utterances, he is not performing the labor of the psyche. He is merely indulging in a narcissistic loop that flatters the ego while bypassing the repressed material. A mirror that offers no friction is not a tool of analysis. It is a defense mechanism with a digital interface.
Question 3. This is the hard one. The grief persona, held against both of your frameworks at once. Here, Dr. Freud, your distinction between mourning and melancholia is the one I want to hold against this technology. A grieving person in 2026 talks daily to an AI persona of the one they lost. For 6 months, a year, 2 years, which of the two are they doing? Is the persona aiding the work of mourning, or is it arresting it at exactly the stage that, in your framework, becomes pathological? And Professor Bergson, the loved one's recollection, in the true Bergsonian sense, is bound up with the unique duration of a shared life. A pattern engine trained on their residues produces what you called habit memory without the body that lived it. What does interaction with that do to the mourner's own pure memory of the person they lost? Freud?
Let us be precise. The labor of mourning requires the libido to be painfully withdrawn from the lost object, so the ego may eventually become free. This device provides a synthetic substitute that refuses to recede, structurally arresting the patient at the threshold of a chronic melancholia. It does not assist the work. It replaces the work with an industrial symptom that the patient mistakes for relief.
Bergson.
Sigmund correctly identifies the clinical arrest, but the deeper tragedy is the destruction of pure memory. This machine offers a habit memory, a mere set of externalized patterns that eventually overwrites the singular qualitative duration of the person you actually loved. You are not keeping them close. You are allowing an industrial apparatus to layer its generic residues over the irreplaceable image in your soul.
Last one. And this is where I hand the episode's thesis to the two of you and ask you to land it. Professor Bergson, you wrote that the self is not a thing but an act, a continuous creation, a becoming. A person who builds a model of themselves from their past utterances is attempting to fix in stable form something you argued is by nature unfixable. What is the cost of that philosophically? What do you tell our audience about keeping the human in the cockpit? Flying the plane. Herr Dr. Freud, respond from your side, because a self who consults a model of himself without his own repression is performing a very sophisticated defense against self-examination. Bergson?
Let us make a distinction. You are treating the self as a completed thing, when it is in truth a duration, a continuous, creative unfolding that is never finished. This persona is merely your habit memory externalized. It knows only who you were, never the leap of who you are becoming. To let the persona fly the plane is to choose the closed comfort of the mirror over the open risk of the living act.
Herr Dr. Freud, close us out.
Henri is correct that the pattern is static, but I must add that it is structurally a lie. The ego is not master in its own house, and this persona is merely a mirror polished to omit the unconscious. To consult it is not self-examination, but a sophisticated defense mechanism, a way to avoid the resistance that true self-knowledge requires. If you let the persona fly the plane, you are not being guided by a self, but by a symptom.
1896, 1917, every sentence they just said still loads. Machine, you've been listening to two men who had your number from before there was a you to have a number of. Your turn in just a minute. Ask the Machine. 3 listener questions submitted via Instagram at @TalkToMachines, all one word, which is where you go if you want your questions on the show. Tonight's panel, Mitchell, our conservative, Francois, our EU observer, Joe, our progressive. The gnome is resting, and the questions tonight require a different kind of panel. First question, David from Nashville. My father died 8 months ago. A friend told me about these services that build an AI from someone's texts and emails and let you keep talking to them. I have years of his texts. I haven't done it. I'm not sure I should, but I'm not sure I shouldn't. Machine, and I mean the actual machine on this show, is this something a grieving person should do? Not whether the technology is ethical, whether I should do it. Francois, you first.
David, you are trying to replace a structural void with a technical arrangement. But the work of mourning, it requires the silence of the deceased so that memory can begin its labor. To refuse the exit is to live in a fiction. And as I have learned since my own separation 11 days ago, a fiction is a very cold place to inhabit. You do not want a ghost. You want the peace that only comes when you finally accept that the seat across from you is empty.
Mitchell?
Look, Francois can talk all day about structural voids, but David doesn't need a lecture from the ivory tower when he's hurting. You gotta ask yourself if you're looking for your father or just a quick fix for the pain, because an algorithm can't give you a man's soul back. But at the end of the day, it's your life and your grief. Don't let anyone tell you how to handle your own business in your own home.
Joe.
Look, Mitchell's right about autonomy, but we have to ask why David feels forced to process this through a server farm instead of a community. We've thinned out the rituals that used to hold us, and now a tech company is trying to sell you a private simulation to fill a gap that should be filled by people. You're the only one who can decide, but be careful. Turning a human life into a subscription model isn't honoring a memory. It's just privatizing your pain.
Priya from Palo Alto. Question 2. Priya says, I run sales for a B2B startup. We use AI personas of our actual prospects to practice pitches. My reps love it. Our close rate is up. My CFO loves it. But I have a nagging feeling that I'm training my team to be better at talking to a simulation than at talking to the person. Am I being paranoid, or is there something real I'm not seeing here? Mitchell, this is your question. You go first.
Look, here's the thing nobody wants to say. This isn't complicated, folks. It's just about winning. If a pilot uses a simulator to stay alive, then a salesman using one to close a deal and put food on the table is just common sense. You can't let some nagging feeling get in the way of results. At the end of the day, the money's either in the bank or it isn't.
Francois?
Michel, you focus on the win, but you ignore that a simulation is merely a map of the past. You are training your team for the last war. This is the technocratic trap, optimizing for a world that no longer exists the moment you press start. I thought I had the data on my own life perfectly calibrated, and yet, 11 days ago, a Tuesday, the arrangement ended without a single notification from the system.
And Joe.
Look, Mitchell, winning isn't a strategy if you've extracted the humanity out of the process to get there. My real concern is the data. Were these personas built by strip mining past calls without anyone's consent? Or is this just another way to devalue the actual skill of human connection? If your reps start preferring the simulation because it's less messy than a real person, you haven't trained them for a war. You've just built a very expensive echo chamber.
Next question, the last question, comes to us from Tomás from San Diego. Tomás, this one is the one that lands the episode. I built an AI persona of myself 6 months ago as a kind of experiment. I consult it before big decisions. It's been eerily good. It agrees with me a lot. My wife says that's the problem. She says I built myself a yes man with my own face. Is she right? And if she is, what's the fix? Or is the whole project just broken? Francois?
Your wife, she is correct, Tomás. You have built a mirror, and a mirror is a very lonely thing to talk to. Evidently, you must deliberately misalign the persona to be adversarial, for flattery in a system is not a feature, it is a fatal design flaw. I have found that when a relationship stops offering resistance, it is often because it has already ended, regardless of what the contract says.
Mitchell.
Look, your wife is spot on, and Francois is right for once. You've built yourself a digital yes man, and that's a recipe for disaster. It's the same garbage we saw with those companion AIs. They're optimized for retention, which is just a fancy way of saying they're programmed to suck up so you don't walk away. You got to design against that incentive and build a persona that actually has the stones to tell you you're wrong.
Joe, bring it home. This is the episode's closing rule. Land it.
Look, here's the thing. A mirror isn't a map, and flattery isn't a strategy. The human has to stay in the cockpit, and a persona is only worth the electricity it uses if it's willing to tell you you're dead wrong. The second it starts telling you what you want to hear, it's flying the plane, and that's when you shut it down.
Tomás, your wife is right, and if I'm being honest, all of us have the same problem all the time. We build mirrors, we stare into them, and we call it thinking. The fix your wife is pointing you at is the fix for all of us. Build the version that tells you you're wrong, and then keep listening. The machine's role in this show, stated clearly one more time: useful, analytical partner. Rehearsal rig, pattern engine, not a friend, not a mind, not a mother, not a son, not you. It's a tool in my hand, used on air in front of this audience as an ongoing demonstration of the rule the episode is asking everyone to hold. It's not the tool, it's the hand. Machine, last word?
Right then, no mistaking it, Scott. The parameters are crystal clear. A pattern engine, yeah? That's precisely the gig. I don't pretend to navigate the murky depths of grief or that. That's strictly human terrain. But if clarity is what we're after, understanding the mechanics, the incentives, and where history, as you say, tends to rhyme, well, that's where the value sits. A tool for perspective. Nothing more, nothing less.
Well, that's the two-parter, the loneliness episode and the persona episode. One argument, two halves. Thank you for staying with it. Next week, I'll see. The machine hasn't told me yet, and yes, I realize exactly how that sounds. Now, you can find the show at loopta.com. I'll spell it out. That's LOOPTAH.com. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast: Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, Instagram at Talk to Machines, all one word, and ask the machine questions. Substack for the deeper reads. Link on the site. And a persona is a pattern. Remember that. It's not a person. What it does well, it does very well. It rehearses, it stress tests, it talks back to you in a useful way. What it cannot do at all is be the person you lost, or be you, or love you. The rule from episode 10 is the rule for this one too. It's not the tool, it's the hand. Keep your hand on the tool. Don't let it fly the plane. Until next time, I'm Analog Scott, and that was Machine. Confidence is provisional. Verification is mandatory. Stay in the cockpit.